Greetings everyone, I'm Mar, and once again this is my opinion. It's now time to review a film that, while it didn't come during the main wave of jawsploitation like films such as Great White, Piranha, and of course every other killer shark movie that's been on sci-fi, it came near the end of the VHS rental era, and unlike a lot of those, actually has the budget to realize a lot of its ideas, and while it does have some tributes to Jaws, it is its own animal, as it were. This, of course, is Deep Blue Sea, directed by Renny Harlin. It stars Thomas Jane in his breakout role, Samuel L. Jackson, Stellan Skarsgård, LL Cool J, Saffron Burrows, among others. Those are just the main names of note. The plot takes place mainly at this floating facility out in the middle of the ocean. It's a holdover from World War II sub-refueling. The place has been turned into a research facility involving sharks to take the protein that's in their brains and help reverse Alzheimer's. Now, one of the sharks escaped and attacked a boat, so the company that is financing everything, which is owned by Samuel L. Jackson, with his right-hand man played by Ronnie Cox in a nothing role. I mean, I still even question why Ronnie Cox is even sitting there. He has no dialogue unless there's a deleted scene with him getting a few lines of dialogue. So he's essentially just a glorified extra there. It's like he could have had so much more. But Samuel L. Jackson's like, all right, I'll keep paying, but I'm going to go and look at the results as you test it. So as you can see, there's also a little bit of similarity to Jurassic Park going on here. It's kind of like Jurassic Park meets Jaws in a way the film is constructed. As I explain the rest of this, if you haven't seen the film, you'll see what I mean. They go. The night the storm happens to be rising, they decide to test on the shark. Test is a success. They get the protein. It seems to be working. But because of the experiments on the sharks, not only has it increased the proteins in their brains and the size of their brains, which is where a little bit of the science fiction comes in here, it made the sharks more intelligent. Human-level intelligent. And so they break out, and they start running amok. And as we find out later, they're herding the humans up so the water level in the facility can rise to the point where they can get over the top. Because the lower levels of the facility have been made to where they can hold the sharks in, but the top is just pure steel, which is nothing for a shark like a Mako to get through. So the whole plot of the film is the humans trying to survive, getting picked off one by one. You know, it's a shark movie, so people do have to die. And trying to make sure the sharks do not escape. Now, if you've seen Jurassic Park, like I said, it does have some of those similarities, you know. Storm hits, the power does go out, but for different reasons. There's no human sabotage this time. There is a smart creature in Jurassic Park. It's the raptors. Here are the sharks. There's only 3 of them, so there's not as many they have to go through. Whereas in Jurassic Park, you know, they had all 3 raptors, so it's 3 there, but they also had the T-Rex, they had the Dilophosaurus. Even though only Nedry's scene with that is actually in the film, there's a couple other moments of them in the novel. And then, of course, having to get through all the other dinosaurs. Even if they're herbivores, a dinosaur that is large can still hurt you, even if it's not going to eat you. The notes from Jaws, it's mainly in the climax, where it's a literal explosive climax. Whereas in Jaws, it involves a scuba tank. Here it involves electricity from a battery and sticks of dynamite. Makes for an explosive climax. Film was made for about $60 million and it made $164 million, so even with Hollywood accounting, it did make a little bit of a profit. But of course, we don't know how much of that 60 is marketing or if that's just to make the movie, and with marketing, it might go into the red ink. As a lot of times when you do research in Hollywood, you see that a lot of times they want to push it into the red through pushing the numbers so they don't have to pay out certain bonuses. Unless it's an actor they know they're not going to get away with that with, like Jack Nicholson in Batman 89. Had a brain fart there for a second. The screenplay was written by Duncan Kennedy with some rewrites by Donna and Wayne Powers. According to IMDb, there were a couple other people, but those are the 3 that are credited. Now, Kennedy was inspired to write the spec script that WB bought from him after witnessing a shark attack, a bad one, on a beach in Australia, which led to a recurring nightmare of being in a passageway with sharks that could read his mind chasing him. Now, while that last part obviously is not in the final script, I mean, these sharks do not read minds. That would have been creepy in a different type of way, but then to be a completely different film. The sharks being intelligent, it's still scary. I mean, the sharks in this type of situation would be scary either way, even if you don't think they're going to eat you. But intelligent sharks, they're trying to kill you and herd you, oh, just as scary. Now, the script was bought in '94, but development on the film didn't begin to '96. And by that point, the Powers were beginning their rewrites, and they wrote the final script. How much of it is retained, IMDb didn't really say, but I wouldn't be surprised if only like the basic idea is what Duncan came up with, and they added all the sci-fi elements. A lot of times when you look at Hollywood, that seems to be the case. The cast does a pretty decent job with the material they have. You do like them. You root for them. A couple of the side characters you're like, yeah, that's a little ridiculous. But it adds to the charm. And, of course, makes them seem like humans before the inevitable happens. It's not like one of those horror films that are like, I don't believe it. I've seen better acting in porno movies. I've seen better acting in porn parodies of these type of movies. Thomas Jane, like I said at the top, this was his breakout performance. He'd been doing some acting before, but this is the one that really caught the attention of Hollywood, and after this he'd be in other films. Of course, culminating in Punisher 04, among others. He does a pretty good job. He's nice as Carter. I mean, he's a little bit of a dick, but considering what's going on, you can kind of see it. He's just standoffish. I mean, just because he's worked with them, he doesn't have to like him. But in the end, becomes a capable hero. I mean, the whole thing with the flares, this is his idea in the end, so it's nice there. Stellan Skarsgård, he's pretty good for what little he has to do there. I mean, his character is not, with what we see in the final film, there's not that much. There was a deleted scene that showed he had a relationship with one of the other characters and she was pregnant. But Renny Harlin cut that because he's like, I don't think I want to kill off a pregnant character. Which is like, okay, that would have made her death a little bit worse. It's just like in the Blob remake when they killed off the kid. It just showed that nobody's safe in that movie. You could have done the same thing there, but alas, that's Harlan's decision. So that's one cut there. Only thing I could really say I liked about his character, other than he's the first one that gets killed, and it's probably one of the memorable moments of the movie where he gets his arm bitten off, is that part of it involves him smoking, and then right after he smokes, the shark breaks through. It's like the shark's going, I said no smoking! No arm for you! You've lost your arm privileges for that. No smoking in the lab. LL Cool J as Preacher, he's a fan favorite character, and I haven't seen a lot of the films he's been in other than this and Halloween H2O. We played the security guard, which he's used a lot better than Busta Rhymes in the film after that, but that's a whole other story. Here you like Preacher, you love his little interactions with the bird named Bird. And of course he has the moment of one of the moments of the film, I should say, when he kills the first shark. You ate my bird. You like him. And of course in the end he is the one that does fire the shot that saves the movie, so we love LL Cool J. Yeah! Kick some sharp butt. Samuel L. Jackson, he does a pretty good job as Russell. I mean, it's also in Jurassic Park, so there's another little connection there with that. This is when he was a household name after Pulp Fiction, after Jurassic Park, so people knew who he was. And even if you've never seen this film, his role in this film and what happens to him is at least a moment you know about. And this is a spoiler, so if you haven't seen the film and you don't know about this moment, forgive me. And that is his character's death. It is a memorable death in the right way because it subverts your expectations, even though with how the scene progresses, you can kind of see it coming a little bit, but it's one of those ones like, are they going to do it? Are they not going to do it? And that is in the words, of Dave Chappelle, they hate me! The shark ate me! That's right. Sam Jackson gets eaten by one of the sharks. So the shark jumps through the hole, grabs him, and pulls him down. Now, Harlan, in an interview, stated that this idea came from Alien. Whereas in that one, the character Dallas, played by one of the well-known actors in the movie, seems like he's going to be the hero of the film. He's the leader because he's the captain. Sam Jackson here, I mean, he's the financial backer, and he's the one giving the heroic speech in that scene. Seems like he's going to get everyone together to get out of there. And he gets killed off. And I didn't check the time, but it's like around halfway, give or take. And he's getting killed off, disheartens some of the people, and it leads to them having to do a backup plan involving escaping. And of course it unsettles the audience, and since his death comes after a corny, we're gonna pull together speech, that's really what throws you off, because you're in the middle of this and all of a sudden, boom, it gets you. It is a jump scare done right. Because most of the time a modern jump scare is just like you jump and you're like, that was... You mainly jump because you didn't expect it. And then when you watch the film again, you're like, ah. With this one, even if you've seen the film before, it's still effective because of how the scene is constructed. So you might not jump once you're watching it again, but you can at least appreciate, like, oh, this is a well-constructed scene. The only downside with it is that this is one of the moments of the film where the effects on the shark are not the best, because the CGI does look a little rubbery. I mean, part of it is supposed to be the shark's wet, but the rest of it, at least when the sharks are underwater on the CG, they still look effective. And of course, when they're animatronics. With Jaws, the animatronics still look good, but there are moments in that one where you could definitely tell the shark not working and the technology of the time do play against it just a little bit. Not as much as, say, Jaws 4, which this film did learn from that. And if we're going to show the sharks more, you got to make sure they work right. And we thank Walt Conti and the rest of his team for that. I mean, Conti worked on Star Trek 4 and the Abyss, so he knows how to do stuff like this. And his team spent 8 months on those animatronic sharks. And here's something he said about them. Number one thing about capturing sharks is getting their energy. They're always cruising kind of slowly, then they snap and just go with this incredible burst of energy. And that way, most of the time, sharks are somewhat lethargic, so probably our biggest challenge was replicating that speed and energy for those lunges. And I will say definitely when it's an animatronic shark, those animatronics got that movement right, especially the scene when Skarsgård gets his arm ripped off. I mean, the sharks are bigger than normal Makos are, but they're genetically modified, so they're supposed to be like that. And they watched videos of real Mako sharks to make sure those movements were done right. So I have to applaud Conti and his team for that. Now, Saffron Burrows. She does a pretty good job as Dr. Susan. The only other major film role that I saw on there to note was one of the characters in Troy, Andromake, if I'm pronouncing her name right. Or maybe it's Mashi. But forgive my pronunciation. Greek and other stuff like that is not my best when it comes to that. Now, her character's fate is probably the only major casualty of the reshoots following the test screening. And that was because in the original cut, she was the hero. With how certain parts were edited, and I guess she's the one that got the final blow on the shark. I don't know if this version of it's been released, and if it has, I haven't seen it. Test audiences hated the ending because they viewed the whole film and its events as her fault. And I can kind of see why. I mean, she and the others that knew about it kept the fact that these sharks were genetically engineered from everybody else. This happened, so you can blame the deaths on her. I mean, if there was a negligence case, she'd be the one being charged with negligence. Just like with Jurassic Park and Nedry, if you had to charge anyone, you would have to charge Nedry. Here, you'd have to charge her if you charged anybody. So they went back. There was some editing and they did some reshoots. With her death, it looks like they used a stand-in because of how it's shot from behind. You never really see her face clearly. So I don't know if they just shot her from behind because that's what they wanted to do. It was easy, or if they had to use a stand-in because she wasn't available. And then other shots, they removed her. Although there are a couple moments in the final film with Thomas Jane looking where you can kind of tell he was probably supposed to be looking at her, but they removed her. And of course, instead of her, it's LL Cool J who gets the final blow, which is probably a better decision. But they also went back to earlier scenes and edited it to make her look less sympathetic. Which I kind of get. And I also think what doesn't help, I don't know if this is a result of the editing they did, or if it's mainly Saffron's performance, or a little bit of both. But the way Saffron plays a character, you understand her motivation because she had a family member that had Alzheimer's. But then how she's going about it and how she plays it coldly. So you can understand why the audience didn't like her. There was probably some more stuff in the movie that showed her in a more sympathetic light. But the audience didn't like her, and with how coldly she comes across in certain scenes, I don't blame them. So them deciding to kill her, I can understand it. You know, she gets eaten by shark. She's the last one that gets eaten, and then shark gets killed. Although I will say the way they did it, the way they set the scene up, she does sacrifice herself to make sure the sharks do not get out. Or she cuts her hand and then jumps into the water. So they did redeem her character a little bit with that moment because she knows going into the water there's a chance she's probably not coming back out. So a little bit of warmth there for her. I'm going to guess with that though, I don't know if she did that and she managed to get out in the original cut and then they decided to kill her off later. It's one of those things I'd like to see the full version of that ending. Who knows, that could be probably from the original ending. And then they just kept it in and added that other little addendum. Renny Harlin once said that this was the hardest film he ever made. And when you see what type of film it is and how the setting is and all the different intersets, you can kind of understand why. I mean, he's filmed other films before, but this one involving all the use of water, it's one of those things like, yeah. And then with all the special effects thrown in there, you could understand why. Which is why I will say it's a good thing he decided to film it at the Fox Studios Baja Complex, which is, funny enough, also where they filmed Titanic. So it had a big enough tank for them to go in there. Because if he had filmed this on location, it probably could have ended up a disaster and they would have went over budget. And my whole speculation at the beginning, whether this actually made money or was by Hollywood accounting a flop, it could have lost more money and then, probably not a good career move. Especially following his making Cutthroat Island, which is part of the reason he wanted to have control of the entire circumstances with this. So I don't blame him. Of course, they also try to save money where they could. I mean, with the parrot, that's not really a trained Hollywood parrot. I mean, you can kind of tell with the voice that is not the parrot's actual voice. If you're around birds enough, you can usually tell when it's the actual parrot making a sound and when it's a dub. And with that, it definitely sounds like something they added in. It gives the parrot personality, though. But they got one that was in Mexico City. And, they could do some basic stuff. Because you notice the bird doesn't really do anything super elaborate. It's not like other movies involving parrots, like the parrot in Pirates of the Caribbean. Wind of the sails, flies away and all that jazz. The only major thing it does involves its death scene where it flies up and then the shark gets it. Overall, Deep Blue Sea is a fun, entertaining thrill ride. It is in the same vein as Tremors, where it's a B-movie premise, but it's produced on a budget, so it feels more like an A movie. And I guess you could say it's also in that same vein as Alien, so. Overall, Deep Blue Sea is a fun, entertaining film. Overall, Deep Blue Sea is a fun, entertaining thrill ride of a film. The special effects are good, the cast is likable for the most part, and while its plot is B-movie-esque, because of the fact it's made with a budget, it falls into the same category as Alien and Tremors, where that budget does lift it up to an A production even if the story is still B-movie quality. Shows that a great director can take material that you'd be like, that's Corman-esque, and with the right amount of money, make it a film that you just want to sit there and go, instead of, in some moments like the CGI on Sam's death have not aged the best, but it's still an entertaining thrill ride. I don't know if I have the VHS still back there because I watched it on Netflix, but it's a film I definitely want to get in my collection sometime soon. If you haven't seen it and you're worried about watching killer shark movies that are not Jaws, this is definitely one that you should watch, because out of the best of the shark exploitation that followed in Jaws' wake, this is the big daddy of them all. This is one that deserves to circle around the whale